So in this video, we're going to be talking through a few ideas around how a hiker can balance out both strength and cardio in their week. Now, this is coming from a question I got the other day where someone sent it through. I'm currently doing high mileage, heavily inclined training. I'm looking at my time in the gym, and my inclination would be to bias the stuff in the gym, doing exclusively upper body and core, given how much I'm working my legs elsewhere. I don't want to create other issues in my efforts to avoid injury in an already cranky lower body. And, this is a very typical situation that a lot of hikers find themselves in because it realistically can be quite tricky, just balancing out your training to make sure that you're fitting in everything you want without overdoing things. And so many hikers fall into that situation where they just do too much and they get foot pain, they get ankle pain, they get knee pain, and it pulls them back. So getting this balance is really, really, really important. But one thing we need to keep top of mind when we're looking at any type of training program is different types of training will create different adaptations in the body. Not all training is created equal, and different types of training will do different things. Now, on the strength side of things, strength training will develop strength, which is very, very valuable for hikers for a number of different reasons, for injury prevention, for movement efficiency, for helping things feel more comfortable, for stability, balance, and a bunch of different things. And strength training will also develop some endurance, in depending on how you do it. Now, in the hiking context, take this with a grain of salt because the difference between building endurance through strength training, where you may do 15 repetitions of an exercise or 20 repetitions of an exercise, is a little bit different to the endurance you may need on a trail where you're doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of steps up a steep incline, but it does develop a little bit of that. Now, alternatively, on the cardio side of things, this will develop different aspects of fitness depending on how you do it, because different types of cardio will do different types of things. There are various different energy systems in the body, various different types of training which will develop those energy systems, various different responses the body gets from things. Some cardio sessions, such as stairs or hills or whatever it may be, will develop endurance. And cardio, even heavy loaded pack work, it is very important to understand, is never going to be considered strength training. Some hikers get in their heads thinking, okay, I'm doing lots and lots and lots of pack work, maybe a lot of stuff on the incline, my legs get really burning. That's enough strength for my leg. It is very, very different. Ultimately, when we're looking at a training for hiking program to get the best results for your time on the trail, we want to be taking a comprehensive approach. Meaning, on the strength side of things, we want to develop strength and endurance through the entire body, through the lower body, through the upper body, through the core. On top of that, we want to be developing lower intensity conditioning and cardio, doing things like hiking and walking and cycling and stuff like that. And then also we do want a little bit of exposure to some slightly higher intensity cardio as well, things that are going to get the heart rate up a little bit higher as well. And if we can cover all of these bases in a way that will progress over time and be relevant for you, it's going to be a really, really good training program. It's going to cover a lot of bases. But then we get the drawback that, when we're looking at all of this, a lot of hikers, they're like, oh my gosh, my legs end up doing so much work through the week. And they're just doing lots and lots and lots of stuff on the legs. They're hiking, they're stairs, they're strength training, they're cycling, whatever it may be. And this can, if we're just doing too much, often lead to soreness and overuse. So it is a little bit tricky. Usually what I tend to see from hikers when I dive into this, and they're like, oh my gosh, my legs are just struggling. It does tend to be contributed by, I guess, the more traditional approach to training. The fitness industry as a whole kind of has that approach of just throwing mud at a wall and seeing what sticks, and just absolutely doing so much and so much intensity, whatever it may be. And a lot of hikers do fall into this. And on the strength side of things, they'll often fall into the situation where they're just doing lots and lots and lots of different leg exercises. They'll go to the gym and do 5 or 6 different exercises for your legs. Or they'll train really, really hard and go to that point where you just cannot do any more and you just get to that point of failure every single time. Or on the cardio side of things, they'll do the whole go hard, go home. And if you don't get sweaty, if you don't get huffed and puffed, if you don't really give it your all, it's not really worth it. And this stuff, yeah, it's fine for general fitness, but if we're trying to balance out a nice comprehensive program, we're going to probably do a bit better with this. So with all that being said, if you're still with me here, now I can talk you through a bit of a solution around how you can get the balance out of everything. Ultimately, if you want to get the best results out of training for hiking, a hiker really wants to get exposure to full body strength and cardio in the same month, not breaking things off and just saying, I'm going to do a bit here, a bit there, to try to get everything through the week. For me, for my hikers, I will typically get my hikers doing this all the way through their training. from week 1 to the final week before they finish up training, we're going to be getting exposure to full body strength and also cardio. As you do get closer to a trip, some hikers may shift the ratio of this and they may end up doing more and more cardio and less and less strength, but there'll always be some of this. We always want to be doing some of this. And realistically, even though a lot of this stuff will be very, very, very leg dominant, it is very, very possible for you to balance this all out so it doesn't end up being too much. Now, on the cardio side of things, a few things you just want to be aware of. For hikers, not all your training has to be hard all the time. You don't have to be pushing things outrageously difficult. You don't have to be getting really exhausted or whatever it may be. And on top of that, as hikers don't need to be walking every day. A lot of hikers fall into the trap thinking, okay, if I've got to go on a hiking adventure and I got to hike for 4 or 5 or 6 days in a row, I'm just going to hike 4 or 5 days in my week, or I'm going to walk 4 or 5 days in the week. But it isn't necessary. It may seem a little bit backwards me saying this, but it isn't necessary. Ultimately, when it comes down to your training week, when you're looking at your cardio, some of it can be that higher difficulty stuff that gets you tired, that gets you really fatigued. But a lot of your training can also be lower and moderate intensity, stuff that you walk out of these sessions and you're like, that was a good session. But instead of feeling tired, I'm feeling energized. Instead of feeling nagged, I'm kind of feeling like I could do more. This can be really, really beneficial because when we're looking at hiking, the number one aspect of fitness that we want to improve is our aerobic energy system. And our aerobic energy system is best developed through this lower intensity, lower duration training. So if we're looking at a week of training and we're looking at say, hey, I want to do lots and lots of cardio in my week, we can think, okay, there may be a little bit of that higher intensity stuff, but also a lot of this more moderate and lower intensity. And a really simple example of finding the balance between all of this, if hypothetically you want to train 4 days in a week, instead of just hiking every single day, or instead of doing HIIT every single day, you could look at doing something like 1 longer hike per week, 1 stair session a week where you push the intensity, get a bit out of breath. That's your tough session. 1 loaded pack walk where you just do 30, 60 minutes or something like that with a slightly challenging pack. And then 1 really, really easy session or maybe an elliptical or a bar. You can sort of see that goes from that whole concept of I'm just walking every day and the legs are really tired, or I'm just pushing things every day. But we got this nice difference between intensities. And that's a really simple way of managing out the cardio side of things. Now, on the strength side of things, if you really thinking like, not sure how to find this balance, one thing to be aware of is hikers do not need to be training like bodybuilders. And what I mean by that is that typical approach of going to a gym and having an arms day or a chest day or a leg day. It's not particularly necessary. You can get a huge amount of work done by just choosing a few key exercises and just nailing that. And a lot of my hikers, if they're looking at a full strength day, they mainly do leg exercises and build out the rest of their workouts around. So to give you an example of what this may look like, this could be a simple 60-minute session where we may start off with a lower body exercise like a split squat. Then we'll do an upper body exercise like a bent over row. And then we'll do maybe a side plank. And then we'll do a mobility session. And we'll do maybe 3 sets of that, lower body, upper body, core, mobility, and rotate through that. That's very, very simple, but it covers a lot of bases. And then we may go and do a bit of glute work and a bit of calf raises. And just to give you visuals on what this looks like, the split squat, maybe something like this, where we're just starting off with body weight and coming up and down, developing the quads, developing the glutes, maybe a little bit of hamstrings as well. Then you move into your bent over rows and give the legs a rest, do a bit of upper body work, working the upper back and maybe a bit of the biceps. Very simple. Then moving into that side plank hip dip, this is just a core exercise, working your obliques a little bit, working a little bit of core stability. Very, very simple. And then just doing any old stretch, maybe doing like a hamstring stretch where you're just chilling out and stretching. You can see in this strength session, we're covering a lot of bases, but we're really, it's not going to absolutely be overloading things. And then the other section, glute bridges, maybe doing something like this for working the hamstrings and the glutes a little bit more. And then maybe just a bit of calf work. So we're getting a nice spread all the way through the bottom. And I'll share all of these links in the video description below so you can kind of check it out. And typically, that could be a full strength session. It's very different to that typical bodybuilder approach. But if you're consistent with it and you work with it, you can absolutely get a really good workout. And on top of that, we may do a second strength session in a week where we just complement those things. We may do a little bit more glute work, a little bit more hamstring work, a little bit more chest or shoulder work, or whatever it may be. But again, it's not a huge amount of volume. It's just go and go and go and go, but we're just doing a small amount of good work. And on top of this, like as I sort of said, a lot of people fall into that trap of just kind of pushing things to the limit, just absolutely training to failure. And just training to that point where they're just like, I cannot do any more. And again, it's not particularly necessary for hikers. I kind of like doing, following the rule of thumb of 2 reps in reserve. And what that means, if we were sort of doing these bent over rows and we were doing this exercise and we said, maybe I wanted to do you 10 repetitions, instead of choosing a weight where you can literally only do 10 repetitions and that hits your failure point, like, oh my gosh, I'm burning, I'm struggling, or whatever it may be. What you do is you choose a weight, which if you really, 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 really pushed it, you could probably do 12 repetitions. But instead, you just stick to the 10. So you always keep 2 reps in your back pocket and 2 reps in reserve. Now, the idea behind this is still a really, really simple way of getting enough of a stimulus to move your strength forward, but it just reduces that fatigue that creeps up with that failure training and it helps you balance out a lot of things through your week. So coming down, it can go really, really well. And then finally, last little thing, if you do feel like you're going through a week and you're like, oh my gosh, my legs are sore all the time, I'm really, really struggling, and I just can't perform in my sessions, then you can either reduce what you're doing in the week, or you can just do a little bit more in regards to your recovery. You can just look at what you're doing to help the body bounce back in between sessions. You could look at doing, making sure you're eating enough food, or eating the right food. Look at your hydration, look at your sleep, look at your stress, or whatever it may be. A lot of things we can do to help the body bounce back in between. But ultimately, when you come down to train for hiking, I would never say it's a good idea just to sort of say, I'm just going to do, cardio on my legs. I'm just going to strengthen my upper body or whatever it may be. To get the best results, we want to be following a nice comprehensive program. And if this is programmed right, it's very, very doable. It's very, very safe. And it's very, very effective. And I think it will just a much better approach. And of course, if you are unsure about how to put this into action, you're like, okay, Ron, different types of cardio, comprehensive strength. How does that all look in a week? If you do need help, reach out. I'm always happy to chat. I'm always happy to answer questions. But hopefully that gives a little bit of direction. If you had to find yourself in a situation, you're just struggling to balance everything out. You're doing loads of walking, your legs are always tight, you don't really know how to fit it all in. Have a think about structuring things out, breaking up the intensities, maybe just taking a bit more of a hiking specific approach as opposed to like the traditional fitness approach, and it can really go a long way. So with that being said, I really do hope this helps. I hope it gives you a bit of direction with your training.